Have you ever looked at someone and seen only their uniform, not the person inside it? Have you ever judged a person's worth by the job they do, by the mop in their hand or the name tag on their chest? We all do it, perhaps without even thinking. We build walls between ourselves and others based on titles and appearances. But what if the most brilliant mind you'll ever meet is the one scrubbing the floors? What if the heart that holds the most passion is the one you never bother to see? This is a story about those walls, and about a woman who was invisible to the world, until the one thing she held secret, the one gift she nurtured in the shadows, became a light so bright it could no longer be ignored. It's a story that asks us to look again, to look deeper, and to question who we think we are, and who we allow others to be. It begins, as so many important stories do, in a place of quiet desperation, with the rhythmic, lonely sound of a mop sliding across a cold, marble floor. The restaurant, the Gilded Spoon, was a monument to opulence. Crystal glasses shimmered under meticulously angled lights, and silver cutlery lay gleaming on starched white linen, each fork and knife a silent promise of an exquisite, an expensive, experience. By day, it was a stage for the city's elite. By night, after the last wealthy patron had departed, leaving behind the ghost of their laughter and expensive perfume, it became Ilara's world. She was the cleaner, a figure who existed only in the periphery. Her worn, grey uniform was a cloak of invisibility. The staff, from the bussers to the celebrated head chef, Antoine, looked through her. She was a function, not a person, the human machine that reset the stage for the next day's performance. Ilara didn't mind. Or rather, she taught herself not to. The invisibility was a shield. It allowed her to move through this world of glittering excess without feeling the full weight of what she didn't have. Her hands, chapped and red from harsh chemicals, would tighten on the handle of her mop whenever Chef Antoine swept past, his starched white coat a symbol of a dream she had long ago packed away. He never spoke to her, but his presence was a constant, sharp reminder of a life she once imagined for herself, a life of creation and flavor, before reality had forced her down a different, harder path. Her reality was a small, drafty apartment and a daughter, Maya, whose laughter was the only music that mattered, but whose fragile health was a constant, gnawing worry. Every swipe of her mop, every polished surface, was for Maya. It was for the medicine that staved off the fevers, for the worn but beloved storybooks they read each night. This job, this invisible role, was her battleground. It was the fight she fought every single night so that her daughter could have a chance at a peaceful day. So she scrubbed, and she polished, and she remained unseen. The other staff would leave in a flurry of tired chatter, their footsteps echoing and then fading, leaving Ilara in the vast, silent cathedral of haute cuisine. She would lock the doors, the click of the bolt echoing in the emptiness. And then, the restaurant truly became hers. The silence of the empty Gilded Spoon was a sacred thing. It was in these late, lonely hours that Ilara underwent a quiet transformation. The stooped, weary cleaner straightened her back. The guarded, tired look in her eyes softened, replaced by a spark of focused intensity. Her first stop was always the bins behind the kitchen. Here, amidst the discarded parsley stems, the ends of carrots, and the slightly bruised tomatoes deemed unworthy of a $50 plate, she would find her treasures. To Chef Antoine, it was garbage. To Ilara, it was potential. It was the forgotten notes of a beautiful song. With her salvaged ingredients carefully collected in a small cloth bag, she would enter the kitchen. It was a stainless steel paradise, a world away from her own tiny, cramped kitchenette. Here, everything gleamed. The copper pots hanging from the rack shone like a row of captured sunsets. The gas stove, a beast of controlled fire, awaited a master's touch. For a few precious hours, Ilara allowed herself to be that master. She would pull her long hair back, tying it with a stray piece of twine. She would wash her hands meticulously, not with the harsh industrial soap from the janitor's closet, but with the lemon-scented soap the chefs used. It was a small ritual, but it was important. It was an act of claiming the space, of becoming the person she was meant to be. Tonight, she had found a small piece of beef flank, trimmed and discarded, a handful of onions, and some herbs that were beginning to wilt. In anyone else's hands, it was a sad collection. In hers, it was the beginning of magic. She moved with an economy of motion that was both graceful and efficient. Her knife, a small paring knife she kept sharpened herself, danced across the cutting board. The onions were diced with a speed and precision that would have surprised the line cooks who so often ignored her. She didn't follow a written recipe. The recipe was in her blood, passed down from her grandmother, a woman who could turn scarcity into a feast and who believed that love was the most important ingredient. Ilara would close her eyes and remember her grandmother's kitchen, the air thick with the smell of simmering stock and baking bread. Food is memory, Maya, she used to say. You are not just feeding the stomach, you are feeding the soul. Ilara seared the beef in a hot pan, the sizzle a sharp, satisfying sound in the quiet room. She added the onions, letting them soften and sweeten. The aroma began to fill the space, a rich, soulful scent that was nothing like the delicate, almost clinical fragrances that Chef Antoine's creations produced. His food was about technique, about deconstruction and foam. Ilara's was about warmth, about depth, about home. As the stew simmered, she would clean. Not as a janitor, but as a chef. She wiped down her station, washed her pot, and left the kitchen even more pristine than she had found it. It was a matter of respect. This was her church, and you did not defile a sacred place. Finally, she would take a small bowl of her creation and sit on a stool in the corner of the kitchen, the warmth of the bowl seeping into her cold hands. She would eat slowly, tasting every note. The deep, savory flavor of the beef, the sweetness of the caramelized onions, the earthy hint of thyme. It was more than just food. It was a conversation with her past. It was a promise to her future. It was the one act in her long, arduous day that was purely for her. It was a reminder that beneath the grey uniform, there was a heart that still knew how to create, a spirit that could not be extinguished. And as she ate, she didn't feel like a cleaner. She felt like a chef. And in the silent, sleeping heart of the Gilded Spoon, for a few stolen moments, she was. Julian Croft, the owner of the Gilded Spoon, sat in his minimalist, glass-walled office high above the city, the glittering skyline a testament to the empire he had built. But he felt no triumph. He felt nothing but a hollow ache. On his desk lay the latest quarterly reports, a sea of red ink. Beside them, a stack of freshly printed online reviews. The words blurred together into a chorus of disappointment. Sterile lacked soul, technically perfect, but emotionally absent, overpriced and forgettable. Each comment was a fresh cut. He had built this restaurant from the ground up, pouring his own blood, sweat, and passion into its foundation. He had been a chef once, a young man with fire in his belly who believed food could change the world. He remembered the thrill of service, the camaraderie of the kitchen, the joy on a diner's face when they took that first, perfect bite. Where had that man gone? He was a businessman now. A brand manager. A purveyor of luxury experiences. He spent his days in meetings, analyzing spreadsheets, and managing egos, none more fragile than that of his celebrity head chef, Antoine. Antoine had the Michelin stars, the TV appearances, the impeccable pedigree. But Julian knew, in a place deep in his gut, that Antoine had lost the plot. He cooked for critics, not for people. His food was an intellectual exercise, a cold, calculated display of skill that failed to connect. Julian had tried to talk to him, to nudge him back toward the heart of cooking, but Antoine's arrogance was a fortress. The masses do not understand complexity, Antoine had sniffed. My art is not for everyone. Julian leaned back, the leather of his expensive chair groaning in protest. He was losing his restaurant. Not just the business, but the very soul of it. The Gilded Spoon had become a gilded cage, and he was its prisoner. An impulse seized him. He couldn't stand the sterile silence of his office a moment longer. He needed to feel something real. He needed to remember why he started this in the first place. He grabbed his keys, bypassing the elevator and taking the stairs two at a time, a frantic energy propelling him downward. He drove through the sleeping city, the streets empty and slick with a recent rain. He didn't have a plan. He just drove, his car finding its own way to the one place that was both his greatest success and his most profound failure. He parked across the street from the Gilded Spoon. The lights were off, save for a single, soft glow emanating from the back, from the kitchen. A flicker of annoyance went through him. Had someone forgotten to turn off a light? Wasting electricity on top of everything else? He got out of the car, the night air cool on his face, and walked towards the service entrance, fumbling for his master key. He was tired of managing from a distance, of reading reports and reviews. Tonight, he would walk the floors himself. He needed to stand in the silent dining room, to run his hand along the polished bar, to reconnect with the physical space. He needed to find a ghost of the passion he had lost. He slid the key into the lock, turning it as quietly as he could. He didn't want to startle whichever forgetful employee was still inside. He just wanted to be alone with his decaying dream. The door swung inward with a soft click, and he stepped into the darkness of the service corridor. And that's when he smelled it. The aroma hit him first. It wasn't the faint, sanitized smell of cleaning fluid he expected. It was something else entirely. It was warm, rich, and deeply complex. It was savory and sweet, with an undercurrent of herbs and something else. Something familiar and yet impossible to place. It was the smell of a real kitchen. The smell of home. It was a scent that didn't belong in the sterile, modernist temple that his restaurant had become. Julian stood frozen in the corridor, his senses on high alert. The smell was pulling him forward, a siren song of genuine flavor. He moved silently, his expensive shoes making no sound on the tiled floor. He followed the scent down the dark hallway, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. It led him directly to the kitchen doorway. He peered around the edge, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. And what he saw stopped him cold. There, in the center of his multi-million-dollar kitchen, was the cleaner. Ilara. He knew her name only from the payroll documents. He'd seen her 100 times, a hunched figure in gray, always with her head down, always blending into the background. But the woman he saw now was different. She was standing straight, her face illuminated by the single light above the prep station. She wasn't cleaning. She was holding a small, steaming bowl, her expression one of quiet contemplation as she raised a spoon to her lips. On the stove behind her, a large pot simmered gently, the source of the incredible aroma that had drawn him in. For a moment, he was just confused. Then, a wave of anger surged. An employee, using his kitchen, his equipment, after hours? It was a flagrant breach of protocol. He was about to step forward, to demand an explanation, his voice sharp with the stress of the day. But something held him back. It was the look on her face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated connection. A look he hadn't seen on a chef's face, not even his own, in years. It was the look of someone communing with their creation. He watched as she took a bite. Her eyes closed, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It was a smile of satisfaction, of deep, personal joy. The anger in Julian's chest dissipated, replaced by an intense, burning curiosity. He stepped fully into the kitchen. "What is that?" His voice, though quiet, shattered the silence. Ilara gasped, spinning around. The bowl clattered against the steel counter, threatening to spill. Her face went pale with terror. She saw him, the owner, Mr. Croft, and her entire body tensed. She looked like a frightened animal caught in a trap. "Mr. Croft. I'm so sorry. I was cleaning up. I'll get out of your way," she started babbling, her hands wiping nervously on her uniform, her invisibility cloak suddenly, horribly gone. Julian held up a hand, his gaze fixed not on her, but on the bowl. "I asked you a question. What is that you're eating?" Ilara stammered, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. It's nothing, sir. Just some leftovers. Things that were going to be thrown out. I swear, I didn't take anything of value." Julian walked closer, his curiosity overriding everything else. "Let me try it." Ilara stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and fear. "Try it, sir?" "But it's not. It's not for you. It's just simple food." It's not gilded spoon food. He ignored her protests, picking up a clean spoon from a nearby drawer. He dipped it into her bowl, scooping up a piece of the tender beef and a bit of the rich, dark gravy. He brought the spoon to his lips. And the world stopped. The flavor exploded on his tongue. It wasn't just good, it was transcendent. It was the deep, comforting taste of a slow-braised stew, but with layers he couldn't immediately decipher. There was a warmth from a spice he didn't recognize, a subtle sweetness from the perfectly caramelized onions, a brightness from a fresh herb. It tasted of patience. It tasted of care. It tasted, he realized with a jolt, of love. In that one bite, he tasted everything his restaurant had lost. Soul. Heart. Honesty. He looked at the trembling woman in the cleaner's uniform. He looked at the humble bowl of stew made from scraps. And then he looked back at her, his eyes full of a dawning, electrifying realization. Who, he asked, his voice barely a whisper, taught you how to cook like this? Ilara was speechless. The most powerful man she knew, the owner of this palace of food, was looking at her not with anger, but with a look of profound astonishment. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. My grandmother, she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. She taught me. We didn't have much, so she taught me how to make a little taste like a lot. Julian took another spoonful of the stew, savoring it, analyzing it. There's a spice in here. It's not paprika, it's warmer. What is it? Ilara's fear began to recede, replaced by the familiar comfort of talking about food. It's a smoked sweet paprika from her village. And a pinch of cinnamon. She always said cinnamon makes savory dishes feel warmer, like a hug. The hug. The word resonated deep within Julian. That's what it was. This food was a hug in a bowl. His own restaurant's food was a cold, formal handshake. He looked around the gleaming, silent kitchen, and then back at the woman who polished it. A wild, insane, terrifying idea began to form in his mind. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a leap of faith that could either save his restaurant or become his final, most spectacular failure. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting. Chef Antoine arrived, impeccably dressed, an air of annoyed importance surrounding him like a bad cologne. The sous chefs and managers filed in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Julian stood at the head of the conference table, his hands clasped behind his back. The gilded spoon is failing, he began, his voice devoid of any preamble. Our food has become a parody of fine dining. It is technically flawless and emotionally bankrupt. We have lost our way. A tense silence filled the room. Chef Antoine's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Julian, with all due respect, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, my kitchen has maintained 3 stars for 5 years. Perhaps the issue is not with the art, but with the clientele's uneducated palate. Julian met his gaze, his eyes like chips of ice. The issue, Antoine, is that we are no longer feeding people. We are performing for them. And the audience is bored. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. So, I am making a change. A radical one. This Friday, for one night only, we will be featuring a new special on the menu. A dish that will not be on the regular tasting menu. Antoine relaxed slightly, a smug smile playing on his lips. An excellent idea. I have been working on a deconstructed bouillabaisse with a saffron foam sphere. You will not be cooking it, Julian cut in. Antoine's smile vanished. Excuse me. The special will be created by a new talent, Julian continued, his voice steady. A chef with a different perspective. Someone who understands the heart of what food should be. The room buzzed with whispers. Who could it be? A famous guest chef? A rising star from another city? Antoine leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his bruised ego. And who is this mysterious talent you discovered? Julian took a deep breath. Her name is Ilara. The name was met with blank stares. No one recognized it. Antoine scoffed. Ilara? Ilara who? From which restaurant does she come? What is her training? Julian looked at each person in the room before his eyes landed back on his head chef. She is the woman who cleans this restaurant every night. The silence that followed was deafening, absolute. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. Then, it was broken by a single, explosive sound, Chef Antoine's laughter. It wasn't a laugh of mirth, it was a bark of derision. "You cannot be serious," he sputtered, wiping a tear of mocking laughter from his eye. "The cleaner? You want the cleaner to cook in my kitchen? This is a joke." "A very poor, insulting joke." "It's not a joke," Julian said calmly. "I tasted her food. It has more soul in one bite than anything that has come out of this kitchen in the last 2 years." The insult landed like a physical blow. Antoine shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. "This is an outrage. An insult to me, to my team, to the very concept of haute cuisine. I have dedicated my life to this craft. I trained at the Cordon Bleu. And you want to replace me with an amateur, a janitor who plays with scraps? I will not stand for it. I will not have my name associated with such a farce." Julian remained seated, his composure unshakable. "You misunderstand, Antoine. I'm not asking you to stand for it. I am telling you it is happening. One dish. One night. Elara will cook her grandmother's stew. We will call it the Hearth and it will be on the menu this Friday. You and your team will provide her with whatever she needs. That is my final word." Antoine stood there, trembling with fury, his career and his pride warring within him. He looked at Julian, at the unyielding certainty in his eyes, and knew he had been cornered. "Fine," he hissed, the word laced with venom. "Let the cleaner have her little game. But when this restaurant becomes a laughingstock, when the critics crucify us for serving peasant food, I want you to remember this moment. I will be here to watch it burn." He turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, the sound echoing like a declaration of war. The news spread through the restaurant like a virus. Elara, the cleaner, was going to cook. The kitchen staff reacted with a mixture of disbelief, amusement, and outright hostility. They saw it as an affront, a stunt by a desperate owner. Chef Antoine, true to his word, made Elara's life a living hell. He didn't forbid her from the kitchen, as Julian's order was absolute, but he used his authority to create 1,000 tiny obstacles. When Elara requested ingredients, they were the wrong ones: tough cuts of meat, slightly wilted vegetables. "It is what we have," the sous chef would say with a smirk, echoing his master's disdain. They assigned her the worst prep station, a cramped corner by the noisy dish pit. The other cooks would accidentally bump into her, muttering insults under their breath. "Watch it, Cinderella," one of them sneered as he knocked a bowl of her carefully diced carrots onto the floor. "Your ball is on Friday, don't you want to be ready?" Elara felt the weight of their scorn with every passing moment. The kitchen, once her secret sanctuary, had become a battlefield. Her confidence, so fragile to begin with, began to crumble. She would stand at her station, surrounded by the clatter and hostility, and her hands would shake. The memory of her grandmother's voice, her guiding star, felt distant and faint. She was an imposter. They were right. Who was she to think she could cook in this temple of gastronomy? She was just a cleaner who got lucky. One afternoon, as she struggled to get a pot to heat properly on a faulty back burner she'd been assigned, the tears she'd been holding back finally began to fall. They dripped silently onto her cutting board, seasoning the onions with her despair. Julian found her there, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't say anything at first. He simply walked over, turned on the main stove, the powerful, primary burner that Antoine always used, and moved her pot to it. The flame roared to life. "The best ingredients and the best equipment are for the best chef," he said softly, his voice cutting through the kitchen noise. "In this moment, that is you." He looked around at the smirking line cooks, his gaze sweeping over them like a winter storm. "The next person who interferes with Chef Elara's work," he announced, his voice ringing with authority, "will be cleaning the grease traps with a toothbrush. Is that understood?" The smirks vanished. The cooks suddenly found their own tasks intensely interesting. Julian turned back to Ilara. "Don't listen to them," he said, his voice gentle now. "They're afraid. People like Antoine build their entire identities on titles and rules. You threaten that. Your talent is honest, and honesty is terrifying to people who live by lies. Don't cook for them. Don't cook for me. Cook for your grandmother. Cook for your daughter. Cook from that place I saw the other night. The rest is just noise." His words were a lifeline. Ilara looked up at him, her eyes red but her spirit rekindled. He didn't just believe in her food, he understood it. He understood her. She took a deep, steadying breath, wiped her tears on her sleeve, and turned back to her pot. The noise of the kitchen faded away. The hostile stares no longer mattered. She was no longer Ilara the cleaner. She was Ilara, her grandmother's granddaughter. She was Ilara, Maya's mother. She was a chef. And she had a stew to make. The day of the special arrived, cloaked in an atmosphere of thick, palpable tension. Friday night. The busiest night. The night when the most important patrons filled the seats. And among them, the most feared of all, Mrs. Vanderbilt. She was a food critic of the old school, a woman whose wealth was matched only by her acidic tongue. Her reviews could close a restaurant overnight. Her presence in the dining room sent a wave of panic through the front-of-house staff. She was seated at the best table, her expression already one of regal boredom. She scanned the menu, her lips curled into a faint sneer. She had been hearing whispers of trouble at the Gilded Spoon, and she had come, like a vulture, to see the carcass for herself. The night was already off to a bad start for her. Her driver had been late. Her reservation, she claimed, was not properly acknowledged. She sent back her first glass of water, claiming it tasted municipal. Each complaint was delivered with a dismissive wave of her hand, a flick of her wrist that made the young waiter tremble. Ilara, having finished her prep, had been asked by Julian to help out in the dining room for a few minutes, to carry out some water pitchers. He wanted her to see the patrons, to feel the energy of the room. It was a mistake. As Ilara, in a simple black apron over her clothes, approached a nearby table, she stumbled slightly on the thick carpet, jostling the heavy water pitcher in her hands. A few drops sloshed over the side, landing on the polished floor near Mrs. Vanderbilt's table. It was nothing. A tiny splash. But Mrs. Vanderbilt saw it. Her eyes, cold and sharp, zeroed in on Ilara. "You," she barked, her voice cutting through the restaurant's low hum. All conversation stopped. Every eye turned to them. Ilara froze, mortified. "Can you not even walk without making a mess? Look at you. Clumsy." Inefficient. Mrs. Vanderbilt's voice dripped with venomous condescension. She looked Ilara up and down, taking in her simple clothes, her worn-out shoes, her nervous expression. "Is this the best this place can do? People pay hundreds of dollars to dine here, and we have to endure this level of incompetence." Ilara opened her mouth to apologize, but no words came out. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, judging her, dismissing her. She was the cleaner again. Invisible, until she made a mistake. I'm so sorry," she whispered. Mrs. Vanderbilt scoffed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Sorry doesn't clean the floor. What is your purpose here? Are you even a waitress, or just some new kind of bumbling decoration?" She leaned forward, her voice a low, vicious hiss that everyone could hear. "You're useless. Completely and utterly useless. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and let someone competent do their job." The cruelty of the words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ilara felt as if she had been physically struck. All the confidence Julian had helped her build, all the pride she had scraped together, crumbled into dust. She was just a clumsy cleaner in a world where she didn't belong. Her eyes welled with tears as she stood there, paralyzed by shame, the target of a powerful woman's casual, brutal cruelty. Just as the silence in the room stretched to an unbearable breaking point, a calm, firm voice cut through the tension. "That's quite enough." Julian Croft stepped forward, emerging from the shadows near the kitchen entrance. He moved not with anger, but with a chilling, deliberate composure. he placed a steadying hand on Ilara's shoulder, a simple gesture that was both a comfort to her and a clear sign of alliance. Mrs. Vanderbilt looked up, momentarily surprised. "Julian? Finally! I was just telling this person about the appalling decline in your service standards." Julian's eyes were cold. He didn't look at Mrs. Vanderbilt. He looked at Ilara, his expression one of quiet apology, as if asking forgiveness for having exposed her to this. Then he turned his gaze upon the critic, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "The only thing appalling here, Eleanor," he said, using her first name with a familiarity that was both intimate and dismissive, "is your behavior. You are a guest in my restaurant, and you will not speak to my staff that way." Not ever. A collective gasp rippled through the dining room. No one spoke to Mrs. Vanderbilt like that. She was stunned into a rare silence, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Your staff," she finally sputtered. "This clumsy girl? She nearly spilled water all over my couture shoes." At that exact moment, a waiter appeared from the kitchen, holding a single, steaming bowl. The aroma that preceded it, warm, rich, and utterly captivating, wafted through the dining room, turning heads and causing noses to twitch in appreciation. The waiter placed the bowl gently in front of Mrs. Vanderbilt. It was the special. The hearth, a rustic, dark stew in a simple ceramic bowl, garnished with a single sprig of fresh thyme. It looked humble, honest, and completely out of place on the menu of the Gilded Spoon. Mrs. Vanderbilt stared at it with disdain. "What is this peasant food?" she sneered, poking at it with her fork. Julian's voice was low and clear, carrying to every corner of the silent room. "That peasant food is the best thing you will eat this year." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Then, he looked directly at Mrs. Vanderbilt, his expression unreadable. "The woman you just called useless," he said, his voice ringing with conviction, "the woman you just tried to humiliate in front of this entire room, is the person who created that dish." He gestured towards Ilara, who stood beside him, her eyes wide with shock. "Her name is Ilara. She is a chef of extraordinary talent, passion, and heart. She is the future of this restaurant." He then delivered the final, stunning blow, a statement that would echo through the city's culinary world for years to come. He looked from Ilara to the dumbfounded critic and the astonished diners. "And starting today," he announced, his voice filled with a quiet, revolutionary power, "in all matters of the kitchen, in all things related to the food we serve and the soul of this establishment. She's my boss." The declaration landed like a thunderclap. Boss? The cleaner was his boss? It was unthinkable. It was madness. Chef Antoine, who had been watching from the half-open kitchen door with a smug look of anticipated failure, felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just a gimmick. This was a coup. Julian had just handed the keys to his kingdom to the janitor. Ilara stared at Julian, her mind reeling. Boss? His boss? The words didn't make sense. It was a dream. It had to be. But the firm pressure of his hand on her shoulder was real. The stunned faces of the diners were real. The incredible, soul-warming smell of her grandmother's stew, sitting on the most powerful critic's table, was undeniably real. Mrs. Vanderbilt was trapped. The entire restaurant was watching her, waiting. To refuse to eat the dish now would be to admit defeat, to expose her prejudice as more powerful than her professionalism. Her reputation as a critic was on the line. With a huff of indignation, her jaw set in a hard line, she picked up her spoon. She would eat it, and she would destroy it. She would write a review so scathing it would not only close the Gilded Spoon but salt the earth where it stood. She dipped the spoon into the stew, her movement stiff with anger. She lifted the spoon to her lips, her expression a mask of contempt. She took the first bite. And the world tilted on its axis. The mask shattered. Her eyes, which had been narrowed in judgment, flew wide open. A look of profound, unadulterated shock washed over her face. The flavor. It was impossible. It was a tidal wave of taste that bypassed her critical mind and went straight to her heart. It was the deep, resonant flavor of beef that had been simmered for hours until it was meltingly tender. It was the jammy sweetness of onions that had given their all to the gravy. It was the warmth of that secret spice, the ghost of cinnamon, the earthy brightness of thyme. It wasn't just food. It was a story. It tasted of crackling fires and warm kitchens. It tasted of patience and generations of love. It tasted of something she hadn't experienced in a restaurant in 30 years, authenticity. She sat there, spoon halfway to her mouth for a second bite, completely forgetting her audience. She was no longer Mrs. Vanderbilt, the fearsome critic. She was just Eleanor, a woman tasting something so honest it brought tears to her eyes. She slowly, deliberately, took another bite. And another. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the soft clink of her spoon against the ceramic bowl. From the kitchen doorway, Chef Antoine watched, his own arrogance beginning to crack. He could see her face. He was a chef, he knew that look. It was the look of surrender. The look of pure, unadulterated pleasure. He had spent a decade chasing that look with foams, gels, and spheres, and had never once achieved it. A cleaner had done it with scraps and a family recipe. A low murmur spread through the dining room as other tables, having witnessed the drama, began to order the special. "We'll have what she's having," one man said, pointing at Mrs. Vanderbilt. Soon, the kitchen was flooded with orders for the half-the-line cooks, who had been so dismissive, were now scrambling to plate the stew under Ilara's quiet direction. She had moved back into the kitchen, shedding her apron and her fear, and was now calmly expediting the orders, her voice steady and clear. She was no longer an outsider. She was the center of gravity. Mrs. Vanderbilt finished the last drop of stew, scraping the bowl clean. She placed her spoon down gently. For a long moment, she just sat there. Then, she slowly raised her head and looked across the room at Ilara, who was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her. Their eyes met. There was no apology in Mrs. Vanderbilt's gaze, she was too proud for that. But there was something else. Respect. A grudging, astonished respect. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a concession. A surrender. A validation more powerful than any written review. Ilara felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled her knees. She had done it. Her grandmother's recipe, her love, her secret passion, it had spoken for itself, and it had been heard. She had not only faced the dragon, she had fed it, and in doing so, had tamed it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. The gilded spoon was reborn. Julien was true to his word. Ilara was given full creative control of the kitchen. Her official title was executive chef, a title that still felt unreal every time she saw it printed on the new menus. Mrs. Vanderbilt's review came out a few days later. It was short, shockingly so for her, but it was the most powerful piece she had ever written. It simply told the story of the cleaner, the owner, and the stew. It ended with a single sentence: "I went to the Gilded Spoon to critique a meal, and instead, I was served a lesson in humility. Go. Taste it for yourself." The restaurant was booked solid for months. People didn't just come for the food, they came for the story. They came to see the woman who had risen from obscurity to become the city's most talked-about chef. Ilara's first official act was to change the kitchen's culture. The hierarchy of fear that Antoine had cultivated was dismantled. Respect was the new rule. She promoted one of the young line cooks who had shown her a sliver of kindness to be her sous chef. She insisted that the dishwashers and cleaners be included in the pre-service staff meals. "Everyone in this building helps to create the experience," she told the staff, her voice quiet but firm. "No one is invisible." And what of Chef Antoine? Julien had given him a choice: he could leave with his pride, or he could stay, accept a demotion to sous chef, and learn from Ilara. To everyone's surprise, he chose to stay. The humiliation of that night had broken something in him, but it had also opened a door. Watching Ilara cook, he saw the joy he had lost. He saw that her peasant food required a different kind of skill, not technical precision, but emotional intuition. He was humbled, but he was also intrigued. He began to ask her questions, not with sarcasm, but with genuine curiosity. He learned about her grandmother. He learned about making something beautiful from nothing. Slowly, painstakingly, the arrogant celebrity chef began to remember the young man who had once simply loved to cook. Ilara's menu was a revolution. She blended the rustic, soulful flavors of her heritage with the high-quality ingredients Julian's budget could provide. Her food was honest, beautiful, and deeply personal. The Gilded Spoon didn't just regain its stars, it earned a new reputation, one built not on exclusivity and pretense, but on warmth and authenticity. For Ilara, the greatest change was not the fame or the title. It was the simple peace of mind. She could now afford the best doctors for Maya. She moved them out of the drafty apartment and into a small, sunny house with a garden. One afternoon, Maya, now healthier and more vibrant than ever, was helping her mother in their new kitchen. She was stirring a small pot of soup, her face a mask of concentration. "Am I a chef now, Mommy?" she asked. Ilara knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly, the smell of the soup mingling with the scent of her daughter's hair. "Yes, my love," she whispered, her heart overflowing. "You are. You can be anything you want to be." She looked around her bright, warm kitchen, a world away from the cold, lonely nights mopping floors, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she was finally home. So, what is the real measure of a person's worth? Is it the uniform they wear, the title they hold, or the balance in their bank account? Ilara's story teaches us that true value lies deeper. It resides in the passion we nurture in secret, in the love we pour into our work, in the quiet dignity with which we face our struggles. Her gift wasn't just cooking, it was her refusal to let her spirit be extinguished by circumstance. She held onto the memory of her grandmother's love, and in the darkest of nights, she created light and warmth from scraps. Julian Croft saw past the grey uniform and recognized that light. He was a leader not because he owned the restaurant, but because he was willing to risk everything on the radical idea that talent can be found anywhere, and that soul is more valuable than technique. And Mrs. Vanderbilt, the cynical gatekeeper, was reminded of a powerful truth, that a humble bowl of stew, made with love, can be more profound than the most elaborate, expensive creation. She was humbled not by power, but by authenticity. This story is a reminder that there are hidden geniuses all around us. The person stocking the shelves, the driver of your bus, the quiet colleague in the corner cubicle. They all have a story. They all have a gift. We live in a world that is so quick to label, to categorize, and to dismiss. We build walls of judgment that prevent us from seeing the incredible, untapped potential that exists in the people we meet every single day. Ilara's journey from the shadows to the spotlight is a testament to the power of seeing beyond the surface. It challenges us to be more like Julian, to have the wisdom to look for worth in unexpected places and the courage to champion it when we find it. It urges us to never be a Mrs. Vanderbilt, using our position to diminish others, but to be open to having our assumptions shattered. The world is full of overlooked virtuosos and hidden gems. The next time you encounter someone in what society might deem a lowly role, remember Ilara. Look closer. Offer a word of kindness. See the person, not the job. Ask yourself, what secret talent might they be nurturing? What beautiful story do they hold inside? Their gift might just be the one thing the world is missing. Share this story to remind someone you know that their worth is not defined by their title. Comment below with a time you discovered a hidden talent in someone, or in yourself. Let's celebrate the Ilaras of the world and remind each other that heroes, leaders, and bosses are often found where we least expect them, waiting for just one person to finally see them.